All right. I think I think we're actually live this time. I literally just did a whole live stream and I forgot to hit the thing to make it go live. So thank you for joining me. If you're joining me, yeah, I really appreciate it. We're gonna see if this works now. We're gonna redo this. That's okay. We have some cool stuff we're doing today. We had been working on some card systems. Here's where we left off. I did change the rows to two columns, but otherwise, we had these two different types of cards right here where we've got like a mint green kind of one with a different icon, and then we also started experimenting with adding some images into our cards as well. And so that's kind of where we left off. We had three, I think, styles kind of defined, and what we're focusing on is trying to really lean on CSS variables to be able to do the heavy lifting for us, instead of tweaking the HTML 100 times with different partials, or just doing all kinds of things and doing tons and tons and tons of just repetitive code with our CSS, using variables as a way to kind of get the most flexibility that we can out of our system. So here we've got our base cards. These are super basic, but I have a couple of new ones for us to kind of play with so that we could do three different cards, which would be, here's our mock-up. We've got the one in the middle, which is kind of like a magazine feeling type of layout here. We've got our Bauhaus, our bright red-orange kind of card there, and then we've got a gradient based card in the top right. So we're kind of doing this diagonal from our mock-up here. And I'm getting a warning, so I just want to make sure that everything is cool. So let me just double check here. Want to make sure I'm actually live. Cool. So I think we're good. Don't want it to get messed up like I just barely did. So yeah. So we're kind of on this diagonal line. Or this one, I guess. We're gonna be doing these mock-ups here. And so if we switch back to our kind of our workspace, we're gonna go over into our code, and here's where our context is. We're actually pulling this now from the CMS. I'm using Django, just happen to be in this case. And so for some context, this is where our card is now pulling information from the database, technically. And whereas before we were working with kind of hard-coded stuff. So that's why we have a little bit more flexibility too in this iteration, this version, because I've added just a little bit of logic to say, if it has an image, then use the image. Otherwise, we're going to use our just plain email icon. And so that's what this logic is doing, is checking if our card has that set or not. And then the other thing is we're actually dynamically pulling in headlines and body content and even our CTA, so that we get some more unique content here. So that's why we've got some different stuff, not just the Cyborg newsletter. We've got Freaky Fossils, and we've also got two different pictures, two different types of CTAs as well, because that's going to play an important part as we're going through that later. So what we're going to do is let's check out our mock-up. We've got our first one in the middle here, and that is going to be our magazine layout. That's what I'm calling it anyway. So let's jump over into the code and get started in our CSS right here. So this is the end of our styles here, but we have been so you can see this is from the previous live stream. We have a ton of these little tweaks that we can do just to change the layout, and we're going to do the exact same thing here. We're going to start up with a magazine class, And then we're gonna basically borrow a ton of these properties to start. I don't think we need any of the image properties though. But most of this is gonna help us get our magazine style over. So I think we're gonna start with this. I think it's this first one with the freaky fossils. Yeah. So we started with this card over here is like our base card, but then this one now has a couple of those tweaks added to it, and so we're gonna need to update this a little bit more to match our layout. The first thing I want to call out is that this one actually is going to be forcing this card into a square. So we want it to be not just a square, it also needs to the image needs to fill the whole background, act like a background image, even though we're not going to be treating it like we're not going to actually make it a background image in the CSS. So let me adjust the screen here for me for my notes. There we go. And then, so let's swap back over here. We need to change this. And the reason why this is important is because in this stream, we're adding a little bit of that CMS power into the flow. So we're combining a little bit of CMS logic with our CSS logic to make this extra flexible. And we want our CMS to be able to swap out the image. So we don't want it to always be the same image or to be hard-coded or anything like that. We want the CMS to take care of that dynamic style. And so that's why we're keeping them separated. I'm not going to make the CMS plug into the CSS and change a background image and URL. And so it's actually just going to be whatever the image is, it's going to be on as an HTML element, and then we're just going to use CSS to make it appear or act like a background image. So let's dive back into here, and let's go in. The first thing we need to do is we're going to change our isolation to be isolate, because we want to be able to control have a little bit more control over how we stack things, because we want to push our image into the background, and then we also want to be able to modify the Z index, and that's kind of why we're using this first property. And then the other thing is we need to we're going to change our aspect ratio to be 1, because again this card needs to be square. It's not going to be full height like the other cards are, and so I'm going to change the aspect ratio to a 1. And then I also need to change actually let's start with that and see what happens when we do this, because I think, yeah, there we go. So now our card is trying to become a square. It's not quite a square just yet. We also need to change a couple of things with the image so that the image isn't kind of overruling or forcing everything into yeah, right now the image is messing with stuff. So let's update this image so that it actually gets pulled out of the flow. We're going to do that with our image class. This is the container around the image. We're going to make it a position absolute. And again, we need to change that Z index to a -1 so that we're pulling it back from covering up the content. And then the last thing is I know that I want it to be anchored to the top, so I'm going to do top 0, and on the left I'm also going to change that to a 0. And if I hit save and we go over here and refresh, we can see now we have a truly square card. Our background is there is now the image is acting like a CSS background image, even though it's not. And our card text is on top, and we can easily select it without anything. So the only thing we need to do is we do need to change the contrast here, because our mockup has our text on top of a yellow background, and that way we can have a more flexible ability to swap out the image without having to worry about losing readability, because black text on a black image is obviously not going to be readable, but we don't always know what that image is going to look like, so it's this one's a pretty good design for like accessibility and also for dynamic content, because it allows the text to always be readable. So let's see how we can do that. Oh, and the other thing I forgot is that in this case, we're actually going to hide our body text, because this is how the mockup was. We wanted to get rid of that content piece. Now, normally you would do this with CMS logic. I would probably do this with the template and say, like, if there's body text, then do something else. Or maybe if it's this specific theme, you wouldn't even have body text because it would be a different data schema. But we're not going to worry about that for this one. We're going to use CSS to kind of cheat our way through to make this match the mockup, as far as our content is concerned. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to hit our headline. We know we have this. Oh, sorry. We're trying to hide the body. That's right. The body content, this is going to be our display of none. If I go back over here, that should clean that up. Perfect. Because we do want the headline, we do want the CTA. And so now we need to take care of those two, to make them readable again, right? So we're going to do headline, and then I'm also going to add in the CTA at the same time. They're both going to be treated the exact same way. They're both going to have a background color of yellow, and then we're also going to let's add some padding, and we're going to make it a little bit smaller on top, a little tighter, but a little bit more room on the width, on the sides, I mean, for our padding. And that just helps helps the text breathe a little bit. That tends to be pretty good. So you can see our we now have our yellow bars so that it's going to be more readable. The only thing left is that our bars are currently spanning the whole width of our container, and that's what we would expect. But now we need to modify it slightly so that it chops, because you can see that the join now is not extending as far as the container, or even as far as Cyborg newsletter headline title. And so I can go in here, and what we can do is actually add a width on this. And this is actually this is kind of a cool little trick. If we do width of fit dash content, we can actually make that, oops, there's the back here. We can shrink this background to kind of match the text length. So if I refresh, now we can see that's all tightened up, and that's looking a lot nicer. So yeah, the only thing now is to tweak how we're positioning our headline and our CTA, and then also we need to get our padding adjusted just a little bit so it's working a little bit better. So I'm gonna go into our CSS right here, and let's tighten that up here. The last thing we need to do, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change the card itself. We're gonna change this to a display of flex. And the reason why is so that we can kind of control where we're stacking these things and push them all the way to the bottom of the card, because that's kind of how the mock-up was, is pushing all of the text to the bottom left. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do display of flex. We want the flex direction to be column, because otherwise we would suddenly be stacking our headline, and our CTA would be acting like a row, but we want them to stack instead. So that's why I'm choosing flex direction of column. And then the last thing is we're going to justify our content to the flex end. So if I hit save, go back over here, we can see we've now moved these down. So if I go in and inspect this, so you can see, yeah, we've now pushed our card content to the bottom. You can see it's kind of hard to tell on the stream here, but the top is now empty space because we're pushing everything to align or to justify everything down to the bottom, the flex end. And since we're in column mode, that's why justify is pushing to the bottom. If it were in just the normal direction, which is default to row, then justify would be left to right, I believe. But since we flip-flop the direction of the flex, it's now top to bottom is our justify. So that's how we pushed it to the bottom, but we also need to tighten this up because if we go back to the mock-up, there's hardly any space between the headline and the CTA. So we're gonna have to modify our padding just a little bit. And if we notice our header, our body, there we go, has some padding on it, and same with our footer. And so we're actually getting double padding between the actual content. So we want to get rid of that, and we can do that really easily with our system that we've set up here. So what I'm going to do is we can define, if we go back up here to our card, NDT card, what we're going to do is we have these padding options for each of those sections. We have a card which has a heading, a body, and a footer, and each of those is currently using all of the same padding definition, but now we can tweak each individual section as needed. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to change our body padding and our footer padding. So if I go back down to our theme here, we can see our heading. This was what we copied over, but we actually don't need to tweak our heading anymore. We can actually just change this to body, and we don't want padding on top or the bottom. Doesn't matter if it's on top, so I'm just going to get rid of it. So we're going to say keep the left and right padding, but get rid of the top and bottom. So now 0 is top and bottom. We're going to keep our standard padding on the edges on the left and right. And then for our footer, yeah, we're going to do something fairly similar, but let's just make sure that this actually worked perfect. So now we've gotten rid of our padding around this section of the card. The only thing left is to get rid of the padding top on just the footer. So what we can do is we can actually copy this down and change the body to footer, because that's what we're targeting. And then we want the padding top to be 0, and then everything else can be just our standard padding to keep that consistent there. And there we go. Now it's all cinched up, and it's looking a lot more like our middle mock-up here. So that's great, actually. First one down. So our next card layout is going to be, I'm calling it the Bauhaus card. It's kind of a nod to some design history, but it's this bright orange card on the left side of the screen. We have, again, a forced square aspect ratio. And actually this one can work either way, but I think it looks cool if you force it to be a square. And then you'll notice that we again need to borrow some of that CMS power of having a headline available, the body text available, but we're not using an image, we're not using an icon, and we're not using a CTA. So all of that is absent. And so that's where the CMS can come in and take care of that logic for us. We are going to cheat again a little bit with the CSS, just to hide some things, but otherwise, we're gonna make this this card into the Bauhaus so style. So let's go back over to our code. We're gonna create a brand new theme here. Whoops, Bauhaus. And again, these classes are being added. Magazine, Bauhaus, and then gradient is the last class that we'll do today. So we're on this one, and so when it's the second card in this row, it's going to be a Bauhaus. So that's what this is doing, and that's how that is being assigned. Just so you're aware. All right, so I'm going to copy some of our properties from before. So this gets rid of a lot of our basic cards design. If I go in ahead and save and refresh here, you can see it's taking care of all of the borders, got rid of the shadow and all that. And you can also see a little bit how it's not constrained to be a square just yet. We'll show you both ways. But yeah, you can see right now it's just expanding the full height. And then this card on the left is just taking up whatever space it can, however it can be a square. And you can see it's barely pushing, it's not quite, I don't know, it's really hard to tell on the stream, but the right card is barely overhanging. So you can see that again, that square is not the full height of this row. But this card is taking that. So let's jump in. Let's look at the mock-up one more time. We can see how it's kind of pushed in the opposite direction. So before we were pushing everything down, but now we need to split some things up. And so that is going to be done on our theme class right here. So the first thing I want to do is let's take care of the background, right? So we already have a card background, whoops, like that. And I'm just going to choose kind of an orange color. This is not exact, but it's pretty close. So if we go over to our Chrome and refresh, now we've got a nice orange background on our card. And we do need to hide our icon. And what we're actually going to do is, because there's no icon on this one or image, we're going to, I think this is where we're going to cheat just a little bit. So we're going to say down here, we're going to add in, we're going to just turn off the card header entirely, as well as the card footer, because there's no CTA. And so both of these are going to be a display of none. And the reason why, again, is it's all based on this HTML structure that we've had, where we've got a header section, which has our images, basically, our image or icon. Then we have our body, which contains the stuff that we want to keep for now for this layout, our headline and our body content. And then we've got the footer, which has the stuff that's also hidden. So we're hiding this one. We're hiding the header as well with the CSS, but honestly, in real life, it would probably come from the CMS logic, the templating logic. But that's all right for this stream. We're going to refresh, and now we've got exactly the kind of content that we need. And you can also see it did cinch up, and it's acting like a square. And the reason why is because now this is now, I'm letting it grow as needed. So I haven't actually changed it to be forced as a square, but since that's what's taking it up, it's taking up all of the space width-wise, and then it's also got no reason to go beyond the current row, because this row is actually a grid layout, and so it's gonna match the height of our our row right now, and so that's why it's looking like a square, is because nothing's pushing this card down, this content card down. So if there was more content, if there was maybe another image or something, it would start to extend past this card on the left here. So yeah, let's see, let's jump back into the code, and this is where we get to tweak a couple of things with our let's see, we're going to do fairly similar things as the last one, where we need to be able to tweak the layout of the card a little bit. So that's why we're not going to be playing with these variables for a second. We're going to again change this to a display of flex, because we need to be able to split apart our content without actually touching the HTML, which is pretty cool. Again, the flex direction needs to be a column, because we want things to stack top to bottom instead of defaulting to like a row based stacking or flow, I guess. And then the last thing is, let's see, I think let's do this. We're going to do a height, and we're going to say it's the max content. So I think this will cinch up our card just a little bit. There we go. So now it's no longer choosing its height based on the row, the amount of space we've got on the row. So that's just to help again demonstrate that this is not yet forced as a square card. But that will probably be coming. So and actually we do have to force it to be a square again. And the reason why is simply because we need to be able to have this space in the middle here. But I just wanted to show you that so that you could see that I hadn't tweaked anything just yet. So we're gonna do this. We're gonna change it back to force it to be a square. But I'm actually gonna keep the height as a max content just for now, because it doesn't matter either way. Actually, we could probably just take that out for a second. Let's double check here. So now we're forcing it to be a square, and the reason why is we needed that space, because otherwise it would just be this. So we need to separate this content though, and this is actually inside. If we look at the HTML, it's inside our card body, but luckily we also separated it so that the headline and body are already separated, and that was from previously. That's how we set it up initially, so that wasn't intended for this card specifically. I actually like to delineate our content like this, especially because I am used to working in a CMS and developing new templates inside of the CMS, creating new database schemas and everything like that. So I do like to kind of describe what these are and segment them out based on the fields in the CMS. And that's why I separated them initially. But now what we can do is we can actually add flex to the body, the card body that contains both of these, and push them away from each other. And so that's just one of the cool things about having a little bit of flexibility in our HTML, in the way that we've set this up, where it kind of describes the content that you see inside of it. So anyway, if we go back to the code, we can see this in action here. We're gonna go in and we want to modify just a little bit our NDT card body. So let's go in here. We're gonna hit display of flex again, and we also we want the flex direction to be a column, And oh, and yes, we'll want the content to be pushed so that there's space in between. So we're going to change our justify content to space between, and that will push the two child elements. It will be pushing them away from each other. So if I hit save, we go back here, we might need one more tweak. Yep. And the reason why nothing happened just yet is because right now the body is just, it's already at the max content, kind of like when we cinched up that card background. So what we need the body to do is actually take up the full amount of height that's available. So if I go back to the code, we're going to add height equals 100%, because we want it to expand as much as it can, as much as the container will allow it to. So if I hit refresh now, we can see we've pulled apart or pushed apart the headline and the body text, and that's awesome. So the last thing we have to do is actually, you can see in the mockup, the header, the headline is actually a little bit larger than normal. So we can actually change this with a CSS variable. And if I'm going to grab it from the card up top. This is our base card, right? And we have a font size select or added here. So we're going to grab that and modify it. Now this is actually from the lost stream of this morning. So I had actually hooked this up this morning, assuming that you could see it, but you didn't. But now we have a font size that is set to this variable. That was not from the previous stream, but now headline has a font size defined on it. And so now we can go ahead and tweak that in our theme, which is way down here. So if I'm going to paste that property down here, and we're going to double this up so it's twice as large as before. So let's refresh, and now you can see it is looking so much better, looking a lot closer to our mock-up. And of course, there are some other things we could do with like the line height to kind of cinch that together. I'm not going to do that. Also, the orange is not exact either. I think we've captured the spirit of this layout though, where we have a headline, body, they are separated. We've got a bold color. It's a square. Oh, and I guess the other thing is we do want to get rid of the border radius on this one. So let's do that really fast. We have a card border radius right now set to 5, and that was just because we copied it from another theme, but we can set that to 0 so that we have sharp edges, which is much more Bauhaus in my opinion. So there we go. That's another theme down. And we just have one more to go through, and that is this one up top here with this gradient. And so this is kind of getting into theming, where we've got light and dark themes where we have to be able to swap colors so that they work a little bit better for readability, so that you can have more interesting layouts. So what we're going to do is let's jump back over here and style up this last card, which I called Gradient. It's not a good card name at all. So if we come up with something better, we can change it now. But I'm just trying to describe like the theme, I guess, of this card, which would be a gradient colored card. So it's not the best. Maybe it could be like I don't know, like yeah, that's the thing. I couldn't come up with anything on the spot earlier in the last stream, but I can't come up with anything right now either. So if you do come up with a better name for this theme, let me know in the comments down below, or in the chat, and we can change it up so it looks a little bit better than Gradient as a class name. But anyway, I'm gonna copy some of those styles again. And let's save and see what that does to our card. So now we've refresh. Oh, something's not working here. What did I do? Is this actually gradient? Did I misspell it? Okay, gradient, perfect. But it is not, did I save? Let's go back here. Gradient, make sure it's spelled correctly. Cool, found it. Oh, that's what I did. I put it outside of our, that's a SAS mistake here. I've been nesting these, I think. Oh wait, that doesn't make sense. Oh, what? Here, let me redo that one. Yeah, that should actually, that's correct. Why is it not respecting? Yeah, let me just try and resave and let me hard refresh this time. Okay, so I must have gotten some cached styles. So I did a hard refresh. That's always a good thing to know. Control on PC or Command on Mac, Shift and R will do a hard refresh on, I think it's Chrome, Firefox, and Edge. It should be. With Safari, there's not a great way to do it. I think there's an option you have to like do view force reload or something like that. It's a little harder in Safari, but with the other major browsers you can do Control Shift R and it will hard refresh and clear out that cache. If you've been playing around with styles on your local, that happens to me all the time where I made a tweak and it didn't do anything, but that's because it starts getting cached, and that will help it reset for you. So with this one, what we're gonna do is tiny little bit of cheat. We're not going to go like exact to what this card is, because I really wanted to capture more of the spirit of the card rather than worrying about cropping the image or whatever. So we're going to make this image full width, because we want that to work like that. So we're going to do image, or actually, yeah, let's target the actual image tag itself. We're going to make this a width of 100% because we want it to span that whole card width. There we go. Cool. And the good thing about this one is that it's a pixel art, and therefore it can expand without degrading too bad, since usually we don't want things to be pixelated, but it's already pre-pixelated. So we can do that, and then what we can do is let's start tweaking the background here so that we can get some good theming going on. So what we're gonna do is, let me go back to the code, and we can add in a card background, and this is where we're going to set our gradient, right? So we have a linear dash gradient, and I'm just going to copy this because it takes a long time to type out and I don't want to do that. We're going to start off by defining the angle of the gradient, and then we have 3 colors that we're kind of passing through. And then what I've done with these percentages is kind of control the stops just a little bit, so that it's not just even all the way through all 3 of these, but we kind of tweak where things end or begin. So if I hit save, we go back here. Oops, again. Oh no. Oh, I messed up. I have a typo right here. We need a semicolon there. And now we should not be breaking our CSS. Perfect. Okay. So obviously we need to change the text. we have our gradient though, which is going from this black to blue to kind of our teal. And we probably need, it's not great. It's not quite this gradient right here. However, I am again browsing this Figma as a guest for this specific streaming browser I'm on. So I can't steal it directly from my original design. So we can always, of course, tweak things a little bit and try to like push our color around. I'll do that just briefly so you can kind of see what that's like. But honestly, gradients, tweaking them by hand is really tough. Really a pretty frustrating experience. So yeah, we can try, I don't know, adding, went the wrong way, maybe, 30, but maybe this one needs to start at like, I don't know if we can start it a little earlier, 75, that kind of pulls in that green just down a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's a lot better than before. So I'll make that change in our actual code. We're gonna make this start at 75% of the way. And if we refresh, no, it's a little bit closer to our mockup, right? But again, you can play with gradients all day long, and that's not the point of this card. It's actually to kind of play with theming, right? So the last thing we need to do is to be able to change the color. Now again, in our Lust live stream, wrong code. We went back into our card and added a card color so that we could be able to swap back between a dark and a light theme, kind of a color scheme, being able to have control over that. So we have this new property. Its default is the black text, right? Yeah. Come on, there we go. Trying to just copy this. But down here is where we set that on our base card class, so that we have control over that on each theme, a card theme. So now we can go back down to our gradient card and change this to something that actually works. That actually works with our darker background. And so if we go back here and refresh, we can see now we finally have something that's readable. It has our gradient background. That's pretty close here to this. The only other thing we could do is kind of play around with the image if we wanted. If, for example, if this was necessary to be able to have this image be a little bit shorter, but it also has to be wide enough, we can tweak that to just, I don't know, be cinched up a little bit. So we could go in and add around our image container. We could set a specific height to maybe like 250 pixels to force it to be the same size for every card that's got this theme. This is not my favorite, what's it called? Implementation of this. Hidden. So we're gonna basically crop our photo a little bit, hide everything that overflows, and force an image height. You'll see how that works here. So obviously it doesn't work amazing for this image. Ideally you'd be uploading an image that is more close to the actual dimensions that you would need for this card. I would probably have like a little hint in your CMS that says like, this should not be a square image because it's going to be cropped anyway. So it should be kind of a landscape formatted image. So that kind of helps. It helps when you already have content that kind of fits how it's going to be displayed, is my point. But that gets us a little bit closer. And of course we could change the height to maybe like a 200. pixel, and that again is going to cinch this up just a little bit more so it's a little closer to our mock-up. Obviously this one is very, very short, but that's one way to kind of get that part of it down. But again, this comes down to working with your designers, working with the content people on your website, to have the right format for the right content. But again, I do try to find ways to work with these systems, to be as flexible as possible so that we can work with what we've got. If they give us a square image, what does that do? If they give us a rectangle, what do you do? And then if you don't have body text, what do you do? If you do have body text but you're not supposed to, what do you do? That's where CMS design and templating gets really fun, I think, is kind of thinking through those use cases. But the cool thing about this is now we've gone through just about all of our mockups. I didn't quite do all of them because some of them were basically the same thing over and over again. Even this glass morphism one really is just a background filter now, adding a filter with a blur on it. And so I think we've captured a really cool aspect of this is like we have a system where we have a base card, and that base card allows us to tweak things very quickly with just a couple of tweaks to the numbers of those values, and we have a vastly different array of cards. These are all the same card, but with different themes applied to them with the class name. And I think that's just a really great system. If we go back into our code, this is where we can see, there is some redundancy. So really, if we're seeing that usually we have to turn off the border, we could probably just swap it so that the card up here, this base card, does not have a border normally. Just change it to 0, and then you can get rid of all of those that have the border on it. Change that to 0. Just add it when you need it instead of having to turn it off all the time. So there is that redundancy that we could go through with this and tweak it a little bit more. So that's how I would go forward with this, is condensing now. So now we've got all of our designs done. Now we've got all of our properties that we know we need, and now we can figure out which one's always the way it is. We never use the shadow in this case, so maybe that's a hover state instead of a default, again, just kind of going through and pruning these so that there's not so many on each theme. So card border always 0, the shadow's always none, the padding is maybe I did actually change the padding to basically be 1.5 throughout this whole thing. So maybe that should be the default. So that's kind of a cool thing for me to take away from this, is that putting it all as much as you can out, refining it by looking at what properties do we need, which ones should actually be the default instead of what we started with initially, and then just tweaking that. But I just think that's so cool that we can have this basically a config file, if you will, for each theme where we're just modifying these numbers. I just think that's such a great way to go about this. And then the last thing is look at these styles. Almost all of these properties are vars. So the only other thing to make this even more bulletproof would be to go through and make sure there aren't any that are not variables. With this one, this was more of a cheat thing because it's the text, so text probably would be defined on a larger system outside of the card component, so that probably wouldn't even be there. It would probably just have whatever the automatic headline classes are, or the H2 H2 properties. So the vast majority of this whole component is just variables, and I just think that's such a powerful a powerful way to do this. So I'm going to be taking that into my work. I hope you can take that into yours. I will shout out really fast that we've been playing with Freaky Fossils, but that's a real website. You can go check out my designs for t-shirts and stuff. Those are my dinosaur drawings. I love dinosaurs. And so yeah, there's that. The other thing is Cyborg is also an actual newsletter that I have been writing every week from the beginning of this year, and we're going strong. So it's about how technology and humanity can actually work together instead of one dominating the other. Because I feel like sometimes I end up feeling like a robot. And so this is an exploration of productivity and creativity and ways to make things better, make our lives better with technology, make our humanity more expressive with technology. So that's in the description down below if you want to check that out. But again, I hope you take away a lot of great tools for how to build your design systems, and in this case a component system with just using variables. So thanks so much for coming. Appreciate